Welcome back to the Big Lad Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be speaking all about the pressures on men to be successful in the modern world, especially driven by social media. Because I can imagine for some young lads, especially growing up, it can be pretty daunting. So it seems to be coming from a few different directions and angles. So I'm going to try and break them down. So firstly, I put out a poll on my Instagram, just asking my followers if they felt a pressure to be successful as a man, especially from social media. So I gave three options. So the options were yes, sometimes, and no. The results were as follows. So 67% of men said yes, 25% of men said sometimes, and then the other 8% said no. So essentially 92% of men that voted feel some sort of pressure to be successful as a man. What I did after that was then message each person off the back of their answer and just ask what pressures they feel and why. And I had some really good conversations off the back of it, actually. But the sort of overarching conclusion was that it was mainly internal pressure on themselves to be better, to fulfill their potential, potentially earn more money. So then what I did was ask them a further question, whether that internal pressure came from external factors, which most said yes, which I thought was going to be the answer anyway, as that drive to become better must come from somewhere. It doesn't just happen. There's something that you've seen or been inspired by as to why you would want those things or to earn that amount of money or to be that sort of person. So a lot of the men that I actually spoke to were feeling a pressure to be able to provide for their family and kids and not let them down, which I can imagine is pretty valid with sort of like the cost of living. There's people living paycheck to paycheck. I myself obviously have a house, I don't have a family, but the pressure to know that you've got to earn a certain amount of money every month, especially if you're, say, freelance or self-employed, that can probably be pretty daunting, knowing that you've got to hit minimum a certain amount of money just to keep the lights on, essentially. Others were saying that what causes the pressure is comparison, which we know is a hard thing. It is hard not to compare, especially with everything on social media these days. You're seeing the best of pretty much anything, any sort of profession, whether it's in hairdressing, in fitness, in business. You will tend to see the best of whatever that industry has to offer. So whatever you're interested in, you're going to be seeing the hyper successful people. So if you look at your explore feed and it's filled with what you deem to be like the ideal lifestyle, and that's all you see, then that's what you've got to compare to, and it could be pretty deflating if you've not got that. Now, like I said, there's a small amount of like hyper successful men out there these days that cover a large space online with Instagram, TikTok, and a lot of people edit them clips even further so they get even bigger spread. And it's meant to come across as sort of motivation, like motivational, but I feel for a lot of people it sort of drives a lot of comparison and then leads to deflation, which when you compare your lifestyle to theirs and they're revealing the latest extravagant purchase, whether it's a yacht or a car or a mansion, then it's going to be very sort of, like I say, deflating. It's not going to be a good place to put you in, like headspace wise. So you may want to just review like what you are actually looking at. And the videos that I'm sort of talking about are the ones like, if I can do it, then why can't you? Or if you're not successful, then you're just lazy. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Obviously, you have got to be so driven to get to the places where these people are. And there's no reason that you can't go and do it yourself. But the average person is likely never going to earn the amounts of money that these people are. They are who they are for a reason. They didn't just get there from working a 9 to 5 like most people do. However, I do think that success should be a personal metric. It's not something that you should be comparing with others, especially when it comes with people from potentially completely different backgrounds, or they're potentially just older and further along the line than you are. So, for instance, like if I compared my 18-year-old self, who was fresh out of college, going onto an apprenticeship, driving a 52 plate Burgundy Ford Fiesta, to now 28-year-old George who's got a house, a decent job. I have an online PT business, a podcast, and a small clothing brand. Then that would be pretty deflating to compare myself to someone who's 10 years further along the line who's put the work in. For me, success should be based on a personal metric, not comparing to someone else what they've done and achieved. So it should be decided on your terms and not others. So for some people, just getting a job that means they can provide for the family and not have to live paycheck to paycheck, that could be success. For others in America, you often see the stories about them being the first person in their family to go to college or uni for us Brits. You don't have to have millions in the bank or flash cars and houses to be classed as successful. It's sort of what you make of it. So before you go sitting there scrolling through your Instagram, seeing these flashy millionaires, then just sit back and just think, what is actually success for me? Like, it doesn't have to be the top of the range anything. It can literally be, as like I say, as simple as not having to live paycheck to paycheck, or being able to go on 3 holidays a year and not really have to worry about it. That could be success for you. It doesn't even have to be monetary. It could be just, I don't know, like a new PB in the gym. It could be as small as that. That could be success for you, and you could deem yourself as successful. I think there's too much emphasis on having to always be related to money, and that's not necessarily always successful. Like, you see these people who are millionaires living these so-called flash lifestyles, but behind the scenes, they're deeply depressed. So just have a second thought. There's also the people who are struggling with comparison about the pressure to just be in shape. So again, like, if your feed is full of fitness models and influencers that you deem to be the ideal physique, and you don't necessarily have that physique, then it could be pretty deflating. And it's just another way of sort of ruining your day with comparison. But what you have to understand is most of these people have incredible genetics, and it's literally their job to be in shape. And another thing, they have these photos taken in perfect lighting with a professional photographer and editor, and they've probably got a bit of fake tan on and a pump, and they're most likely taking some sort of performance enhancing drug, whereas you most likely work a 9 to 5, have a family and house to look after, maybe have a spare couple of hours in the week to just keep fit and healthy and go to the gym and get a workout in. So looking like a model isn't necessarily your priority. And what you'll actually find is most of these people have deep mental health issues with things like eating disorders and just generally really bad body dysmorphia, just because of them looking this insane way in photo shoots, and then potentially in an off season they put a couple of pounds on, get a bit fluffier, and it really affects them mentally. And not only that, if they're dieting down to these really low levels of body fat, that is going to have a massive impact on your mood as well. So for you, working like a standard 9 to 5, looking after your kids, cooking the dinner when you get in from work, the last thing you want to add on to that is absolute misery with lack of food and bad moods, and that will then affect relationships and things like that. So just because they look absolutely amazing doesn't mean it's all sunshine and rainbows. There are negatives to it too. Now, am I saying that you can't be in better shape? Absolutely not. Of course you can be in better shape, but just reset your expectations, because unless you have those incredible genetics that these people tend to have, you're probably never going to look like these people, and there's a reason they are who they are. Like, it's similar to the saying about you don't pick your sport picks you. That is kind of like, you're a rugby player because you're big. You're not big because you're a rugby player. I think I got that the right way around. But yeah, they are who they are for a reason. They look insane. They've got these great genetics. They're in that industry for a reason. So just reset and recalibrate your expectations on what you can actually achieve physically. Another thing is, if you are starting the gym later in life, it's going to be a lot harder to get to those sort of positions because of the whole newbie gains. And if you're a man, if you're later in life, you've got a lower testosterone, so there's a less chance of you being able to sort of pile on a load of muscle. So it all depends as well, age, background, social setting, whatever you've got going on. So just recalibrate, know what your sort of limits are and why, and just understand them. There's no shame in not being able to look like a fitness model. Most of us will never look that good. But yeah, this also leads on. I had another conversation about a lad coming from sort of an elite sports background, which then developed a fear of being average, and it drove the expectation to be the best, which is then carried on into other aspects of life. Even just people that go to the gym can often find that being in a set structure and a routine can then help move into sort of work life and personal life and really help get some structure behind everything, and the benefits are massive. But I can also attest to this because I kind of come back from like an elite sport background with my rowing. So if you didn't know, I used to row back in high school and college. I had GB trials twice. I've rowed at some of the biggest events nationally. I rowed at the Queen's Coronation. I think that was around teen. Don't quote me on it. It was around that sort of time. So I've been at some of the biggest events. I come from that sort of background, and it's a very sort of an elitist sport. So I know what it takes to be at the top level and what you need to do. But like the rowing club that I used to row for was relatively small and local, but it was actually very competitive on a national level. We had a couple of quads win nationals and then represent GB at international tournaments and races. And there was also nothing I loved more than beating posh people at their own sport. But it was also sort of ingrained to me and my brothers by my dad at a young age that we could quite easily be average. And it was about fulfilling our potential to be the best that we can be. Now, I think in this day and age, it is extremely easy to be average because there is that lack of drive in this generation to actually get off their arse and go and do something. And we are in the easiest time ever to actually be able to go and achieve something because we have literally everything in the palm of our hands on a phone. There is essentially nothing you can't do or someone you can't reach on the whole planet. It is insane. But it was going back to what my dad brought us up. Like he also said, like when, say, for example, when we play football and we tried our best and hit our potential, then say if that got us to say League Two in the English leagues, then that's good enough, as it was going to be the best we could ever be. It's not necessarily about going and winning the World Cup, or it's actually about just hitting your potential. And if your potential is this level and not this level, then that's perfectly fine because you've hit your like actual ceiling of where you can be. So with that being said, the average time that people do spend on social media in the UK is around 2 hours a day. And that's just an average. So I imagine if we brought the demographic down to sort of 18 to 35, I imagine that would increase dramatically. So if you're spending that amount of time every day looking at what is deemed to be the ideal situation and you don't have that, then it can potentially be a very negative headspace to put yourself in. So we just need to remind ourselves that Instagram only really shows the best things. We very rarely see people actually being real and like actually showing the negative sides of their lives. So like just take it all with a pinch of salt. That may be one photo. The rest of the day may have been miserable. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. So unless something like if they're actually famous enough for it to reach the news, then you're never going to see the negative side of these so-called successful people's lives. And often you'll see people in front of mansions with Lamborghinis, yet it's been rented out for the day and they've paid a photographer to go and take photos in front of like an Airbnb or someone else's house. So, like I say, it's worth taking it with a pinch of salt. But there are ways around struggling with comparisons. Simply having like a sweep of your Instagram or social medias that you use, go through the accounts that you follow and really think whether it is an actual net positive or negative by following them. You can also go through your explore feed now, long hold a post and just say not interested. So you can essentially curate your explore feed and what you actually want to see more of. So that could be a really helpful sort of just way of seeing more positive stuff that's going to put you in a better headspace instead of putting yourself under pressure for absolutely no reason. So sticking with social media, we're now going to move to sort of the more toxic side of the pressure on men to be successful. And we are going to be talking about the clips of women that you see online. This tends to be in podcast clips or street interviews. And it's where the women say that the man needs to earn X amount of money, and it's always like an absurd amount of money in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. And I often sit there looking at them thinking, like, you either don't have a grasp on reality of how many people actually earn that amount of money, or you're just genuinely delusional. Now, just to make it clear, this isn't like an attack on women. I know this is a small amount of women on these podcast clips, and there are certain type of women that, the whole standard gold digger sort of thing. So I'm not sat here having to go all women saying, oh, all women think like this, because I know for a fact they don't. Like, just, again, take things with a pinch of salt before you be a little wet wipe and getting in the comments and kicking off. So there's actually a tool that someone made in America. It's called the Female Delusion Calculator. And this actually has like a load of statistics built into it. So it's based on age, race, minimum height, minimum income, and it'll give you a percentage of men in the US that actually fit that criteria. So I imagine if a lot of women were going onto this app and putting the, like I say, X amount of hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars that they want their man to earn, they would very quickly realize that there's a very, very small portion of men that actually earn this amount of money. And then that gets me thinking about the trends that you see on TikTok and Instagram. So you've got the 666 trend, which is you've got to be over 6 foot, 6-figure income, and 6 inches. And then the latest TikTok trend, which is 6'5", blue eyes, works in finance with a trust fund, which I actually saw a woman break down in a brilliant TikTok video of how many men this would actually equate to. And it came out in a calculations that it's 2 men in the whole of the US that actually fit that criteria statistically. And I've got a copy of the link to that TikTok in the YouTube bio. So if you are following along on Apple or Spotify, hop over to YouTube if you want to see that video. But I often think when I see these women say these things as well on these podcasts, like, if your man is offering all of this, then what are you offering on the other side of the table? Because it seems they often don't really want to work, and they literally want to use their man as a bank account for them to go and live their best life, which I don't really see as fair. Because if a man's got to do all of this, put all the work in, earn these 6-figure incomes, even 7-figure incomes in some of these videos that they're sort of wanting, then what is on the other side of the table? Because they never really say what they bring, and it's usually just cut down very short to, like, I bring this. And I'm like, so all you're saying is that you're bringing sort of the looks, which will naturally fade over time. Whereas obviously there's some of the criteria that men can't actually impact, such as the height and whether they've got a trust fund. That's purely dependent on their parent situation. And yeah, it does get me thinking, like, there's got to be an equal and opposite. Like, it doesn't have to be necessarily like the woman's on the other side earning 6 figures as well. There can be other things like being able to look after a family and things like that. So I'm not also saying that men have to be the sole bread provider. I'm just saying there's got to be something that they bring to the table if they're requesting such a high caliber of man that's been put on this sort of pedestal. But yeah, like I mentioned, the criteria for these men is pretty delusional in the first place. So, for example, in the US, only 0.1% are over 6'5" to begin with. Never mind the salary or whether they've got a trust fund or whether they've got blue eyes or working in finance. 0.1%. So if you got 1,000 people in a room, one of them is likely to be over 6'5". Just one. So if you've got a room of, I don't know, 1,000 women, and even 10 of them had this criteria of 6'5", blue eyes, finance, trust fund. Only one of them is going to potentially end up happy. So, like I mentioned as well before, I'm actually aware that most of the women out there don't want all of this criteria, and quite a lot of it is social media hype. Either that, or there's a lot of unhappy women out there with men that are shorter than 6 foot and don't earn six figures, but I highly doubt it. I know that it's a lot of social media hype and it gets blown out of the water far too much. Like, trends come and go, we know that, but it doesn't help men in a way that it adds pressure to men to be successful, because I imagine there's fellas out there busting the balls to earn more money to be seen as more successful by men or women so that you can potentially date. But there's a point where if all they're doing is working to satisfy an income, then this probably isn't going to be that attractive to potential partners, as they'll never be able to spend time with them. There also seems to be a bit of a double standard, as women can have all these preferences and nothing really happens, but as soon as men have preferences, then there seems to be a bit of a kick-off from the side of women, and there's a bit of an offence taken. So there does seem to be a little bit of a double standard, and I'm not sure why. I've seen this be like kick-offs on, again, podcasts where there's been women saying that they want this, that, and the other, and then a guy on the other side of the table goes, well, what if I want this, this, and this? And then it just seems to blow up massively. And there's, yeah, like I say, big kickoffs on podcasts. But either way, none of these standards are helping the fact that it does put pressure on men, especially when there's things that people can't control, such as the height, their eye colour, and the length of their old boy. So, like I say, I know that it's not every woman, but even if you're someone that doesn't believe in all this stuff, then you're not helping the cause. But it could also, like, these trends could also damage the actual chances of women finding a man that they might like, because we all know that men are the ones that are expected to make the first move. But if there's a guy that's, say, 5'8" or 5'10" even, then like maybe they're not going to have the confidence to approach a woman due to the preconceived thought that they may be into guys that are only 6 foot and above. As I've mentioned as well, multiple times, just to make it clear, this isn't an attack on women. I'm just going off what I see on social media and conversations I've had with other men. So I know full well it's a very, very small amount of women that have these thoughts, and it does get absolutely blown up on social media, and it's all we seem to see, the negative side of it. And I know the majority of women do not have these thoughts, but I'm just saying that if you don't actually believe or want the whole 666 or the 6'5", blue eyes, finance and a trust fund, then you could be part of the problem as to why guys aren't that confident. And I also don't have an issue if that is your preference. We're all entitled to preferences and opinions. But I am a chartered accountant, so numbers is my thing. So I just think you're a little bit delusional as to how many people fit those criteria. But hey, a woman can dream. Yeah, it's a big topic. I think it really is. And I think there are a lot of fellas out there that are probably silently struggling. I try and have sort of as many of these conversations as possible on like leading up to this podcast, just to get a load of different guys' opinions. And it was crazy how many of them were so similar. Like, it's internal pressure, but it's internal pressure based on external factors that have obviously impact that. And because so much is out there on social media these days, that is what's driving it. So I think it, like I mentioned before, go through your social medias, look at who you're following, look at what is coming up on your explore feed, and essentially curate what you are going to see, because it puts out there what you're interested in. If you keep liking loads of photos of Lamborghinis and mansions, guess what you're going to see? A load of Lamborghinis and mansions. So just be careful. If it's having a negative impact on you, one, spend less time on social media, and two, like I said, curate your Explore feed and what you see. So yeah, this is going to link in pretty well with a podcast that's coming up, which is on men's mental health. Obviously, the pressure on men to be successful will definitely link into that. So this will probably have a bit of crossover. Just keep an eye out. That will be coming up soon. I don't want to delve in too much into the mental health side because that's just going to end up being two of the same podcast or a really, really long one of just me speaking. So yeah, that's my thought. Well, not even necessarily my thoughts. Some of it is also just things that I've got from fellas that I've spoke to that very kindly replied on the back of the poll that I put up, which, like I mentioned, it is interesting. There was so many people with very similar comments around why they feel pressured, and it's tough out there. And linking into the mental health side, if you are struggling, obviously speak up. My DMs are always open. I've always said this, like, I'm an open book. If anyone's struggling, if you want to have a chat about anything, then drop me a message. We can have a chat. It'll stay between us. But if not, speak to someone that you know. And if you are potentially even too worried or embarrassed about what people may think, then there are always sort of like anonymous helplines and things like that that you can use. So don't be afraid to speak up, because there is nothing worse than trying to deal with problems on your own. Problem shared is a problem halved. So yeah, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't bottle it up. We are very bad as men for doing it. And like I say, it's going to link into the mental health podcast. So keep an eye out for that one. But if you have enjoyed this one, let me know in the comments. Drop it a like, drop it a review on Apple or Spotify. It really helps the podcast out. If you've got any thoughts about this podcast, if there's any potential further discussions, then get in the comments and let me know. Always open to conversations. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you later.